In the beginning, there were stories. These are stories that people told about their origins, about how it is that they came to be as human beings, as Israelites, what united them, what made them distinct, what divided them. Why did certain things look the way that they did? Why did they do certain things that they did? All communities develop such stories. These stories that the Israelites developed, right, must have circulated probably by use of bards or people who had memorized the stories. They retold them, they changed them over time, and ultimately different communities heard different versions of the same story. Some they liked better, this community laughed for that, the bard changed the script a little bit. Many of the stories that we find in the Hebrew Bible began in this way. They began as oral creations. Those oral creations, over time, there are scribes that decide to write them down, or they write down one or several versions. Did anyone read them? That's unclear. Did anyone use them as scripts? Again, not entirely clear. Why did the scribes write them down? Not totally clear. But what we do have beginning to emerge probably already in the 9th, 8th, 7th even centuries BCE are a set of stories that are written down by scribes. Ultimately, some of these texts are going to survive from 586, and some are not. Of course, the ones that didn't, we don't know about. We have references to them in the modern day Bible, sometimes referred to as it is written in the book of this or the book of that, but we don't have the book of this or the book of that. Some survived the destruction in 586 BCE, though, and together with the scribes go into Babylonia. It's there, apparently, that somebody brought these texts together into coherent units. So the Torah, then, is redacted out of these texts of different scripts of originally oral tradition. The book of Isaiah is probably a combination of 2 or even 3 prophets. That's a little bit later, but gets put together into one book that looks kind of whole, at least. The way in which those texts then become sacred, the way in which they're accepted by a community, is known as canonization. And canonization is a process, right? It's not a decree that some authority makes. It's a group of people saying, these texts are our texts. These texts are the authoritative texts. And canonization developed over a long period of time. So the Tanakh, right, comes into being, the Hebrew Bible, Jewish scripture, comes into being really as a single book only probably in late antiquity, the time of the rabbis. Even though all of those texts were seen as authoritative by large swaths of the Jewish community in time. That set of texts becomes known as scripture. Right? So again, I've been using different terms to denote what I mean by this body of texts. So for Jews, they might call it within their own environment Jewish scripture, the Jewish Bible, or the Tanakh. The Tanakh is an acronym that stands for the 3 different parts of this book: the Torah, the Pentateuch, Nevi'im, or the prophets, and Ketuvim, or the writings. You take the T, N, K together, put in some vowels, you get Tanakh. Of course, Christians would refer to this as the Old Testament, right? Which is a theological term, because to have an Old Testament, you need a New Testament. The different documents that would make up the Tanakh and the Tanakh itself exercises different kinds and modes of authority all throughout Jewish history. On the one hand, it is an icon, the Torah scroll, right, that is not read for meaning, but is read liturgically. For example, it comes out and plays one kind of role. The reading of the Torah in order to make law is a very different kind of authority. For many Jews, the Bible has authority even though they haven't read it. It's unclear whether they even agree with it and what kind of authority it has. This, by the way, is also true of Christians. So the kind of authority that something has actually changes quite a bit. What is important to note and what one can understand from that kind of origin of Scripture is that it's polyvocal. It's not written coherently. So you have these different scripts or these different texts that are put together, some of which contradict each other, some of which emphasize different things, some of which repeat each other. You can understand that in different ways depending on your outlook. You can understand that as incoherence, or you can understand that as a source of great productivity, that one could look at a polyvocal text and see many things on it and root what it is that they want to root in that text. So the Bible doesn't say one thing. Even Jewish scripture doesn't say one thing. It says many things. And the fact that many different Jewish groups through history can have many different views and say they're all based in Jewish scripture is not an exaggeration at all, but in fact part of the very essence of what Jewish scripture is.